Amber Cox, you're gonna find time in your busy day in between getting coffee in the morning and sitting back doing nothing in the afternoon and reading your book for brunch. You're gonna find time in between being a useless general manager to go back and forth with Caitlin Clark fans. Well then, you know what? Get cooked. You know what I mean? Get cooked. If you can't find time.
That's not just frustration, that's months of pent-up anger finally finding a target, and the target is Amber Cox, the Indiana Fever's general manager who just made a catastrophic miscalculation. She thought she was defending her organization. Instead, she walked directly into a buzzsaw of her own making. Because here's what happened. While major media outlets spent 2 weeks running coordinated hit pieces on Caitlin Clark, calling her selfish, questioning her character, painting her as a bad teammate, Amber Cox stayed completely silent. Not a single statement, not one word of defense. Radio silence. But then a fan on social media pointed out that Cox only seems vocal after wins, only celebrates when Clark isn't the story. And suddenly, Amber Cox had plenty to say. She fired back at that fan, defending her team, insisting everyone loves each other, and that's when the floodgates opened.
Fever fans, we appreciate you. Can't thank you enough for always showing up for us at home and on the road. We hear you and are incredibly grateful for the support. Now, a fan responded. Amber Cox is always loud after a win. She is always loud after a win. Remember the "in case you missed it" post? When Caitlin Clark sat out, knowing that nobody watched, but in case you missed it, Kelsey Mitchell had a monster game.
Look at that attendance data. That's not opinion, that's fact. Indiana Fever home attendance has declined every single year since this current front office took control. Every year. Amber Cox arrived, attendance dropped. Kelly Krauskopf returned as team president, attendance dropped again. Stephanie White became head coach, and the trend continued downward. Those are verifiable numbers. And then Caitlin Clark gets drafted, and suddenly the building is packed. Suddenly there's a wait list for season tickets. Suddenly the Fever are relevant again. But here's the problem. This front office wants credit for the success, while distancing themselves from the player who created it. They want the revenue Caitlin generates without acknowledging who's generating it. And fans see that. They're not stupid. They watch how the organization celebrates Kelsey Mitchell's Puma deal with genuine enthusiasm, then treats Caitlin's Nike signature shoe reveal like an obligation. They notice Stephanie White announcing her own shoe collaboration the same day Caitlin reveals hers. These aren't coincidences. This is a pattern.
Amber Cox with the response. Nonsense. You know who was also happy after any win? Cece. Because this is a team full of people who celebrate and care for one another, and like all of them, she's a great teammate. We all cannot wait to have Cece back on the court. Enough with this ridiculous narrative. So Amber Cox has enough time to respond to narratives within the fan base, but doesn't have enough time to respond to narratives from USA Today, ESPN, The Athletic, Yahoo, Washington Post, all piling on Caitlin Clark, calling her a bad teammate, a selfish player, this, that, and third. Amber Cox doesn't have time to respond to that.
Now we need to talk about what Amber Cox actually said, because this is where it gets revealing. A fan pointed out that Cox stays quiet when narratives attack Clark, but jumps online to argue with fans. Cox responded, "You know who was also happy after any win? CC. Because this is a team full of people who celebrate and care for one another. She's a great teammate. We all cannot wait to have CC back on the court. Enough with this ridiculous narrative." That's the response. Not to ESPN, not to The Athletic, not to USA Today, not to Yahoo Sports, not to the Washington Post. All of those outlets ran stories in the span of 2 weeks, questioning Caitlin's character, her leadership, her teammate relationships. The Athletic published a piece suggesting locker room tension, ESPN platformed analysts calling her overrated. USA Today ran commentary about her being a selfish player. And through all of that, the Indiana Fever front office issued exactly one statement. One. A generic corporate speak paragraph that said basically nothing. It didn't defend Caitlin specifically. It didn't push back on false narratives. It didn't name a single outlet or journalist. It was the bare minimum, released only after congressional representatives got involved.
Interesting. Now I chimed in. I was like, Amber, great to see you have time today to go back and forth with fans. While I have you here, Indiana Fever home attendance has gone down every year since you, Kelly, and Stephanie showed up. Would love to hear your thoughts as to why you think this. I haven't gotten a response. I don't think I'll be getting a response, but haven't gotten one yet. Amber Cox getting crushed. Why hasn't Amber said anything about the Kaylin and AT situation? What CeCe's actual injury is? Why did Scott get fired? Why 2-minute intervals? Why keep Dantas over Justine? Why not fire the coach? 3 All-Stars in 7th place in standings. 10th out of 15th in defensive rating. Cooked? Oh, it's not going to away. It's not going to go away. We see you for where you are. Maybe try a little competence for a change to get the people back on your side. Cooked?
But Amber Cox has time to argue with fans on social media. She has time to respond to someone with a Caitlin Clark avatar pointing out observable patterns in how the organization operates. And that tells you everything about priorities, because if you're a general manager, your job isn't to win Twitter arguments. Your job is to build a championship roster, manage the salary cap effectively, make smart personnel decisions, and protect your franchise player from coordinated media attacks. Amber Cox has failed at most of those responsibilities. The Fever have 3 All-Stars on the roster and finished 7th in the standings. They ranked 10th out of 12 teams in defensive rating. They kept Damaris Dantas on the roster while cutting Temi Fagbenle, a decision that made no basketball sense. They fired their assistant coach Scott Agnes mid-season with no explanation. They implemented a minutes restriction on Caitlin Clark that had her playing 3-minute intervals, which is not how minutes restrictions work in professional basketball. You don't pull someone after 3 minutes, let them sit for 5, then put them back in for 3 more. That's not load management, that's something else entirely. And when fans ask questions about these decisions, they get attacked for being toxic or obsessive or unreasonable.
Hooked? People have eyes and ears, Amber. By the way, any comments on the real media narrative that Caitlin Clark is the 11th best guard? Compare the 2 locker room videos and tell us we are wrong and we are blind. Cooked? Proof is in the pudding. Cooked? You don't defend the fans. You allow us to be called racist. You allow White to sabotage her. You allow the other teams to hurt her. You are the problem. Cooked? Where is our backup center, Amber? Find us a starting 4 who can be relied on, please. Cooked? Nice deflection, Amber. We see how Coach White reacts towards CeCe compared to others. Tape doesn't lie. Cooked? We are aware of your desire to get rid of Caitlin. Please realize this. Your actions scream how much you hate her. Yes, hate. Jealousy is your calling card. Cooked? Hey, Amber, explain how AB had 38 minutes on...
Here's what the response to Amber Cox looked like. Thousands of replies. Thousands. And they weren't just angry rants. They were detailed, specific critiques of her performance as general manager. Fans brought receipts. They pointed out that Cox has never built a championship team before. They noted that she allowed Caitlin to be physically targeted all season without the organization making a strong public statement demanding better officiating. They highlighted how Cox stayed silent while Angel Reese's illegal screens went uncalled game after game. They questioned why the Fever didn't add a legitimate backup center despite having roster flexibility. They asked why the team's perimeter defense remained atrocious despite having the entire offseason to address it. These weren't casual fans complaining. These were people who had invested thousands of dollars in tickets, traveled hours to games, bought merchandise, supported the franchise financially, and they're watching their investment get mismanaged in real time. One fan mentioned spending over $15,000 on Fever tickets in the last 3 seasons, driving 2 hours each way to attend games. That person has earned the right to ask why the front office is blowing a generational opportunity.
Cooked? Please trade Caitlin to the Sparks. Cooked? Bullshit. Cooked? When do you address the intentional assault on CeCe? When does the Fever stand up and demand it stopped? Why does CeCe have minute restrictions with 3-minute clips? Do you question the coach on why CeCe is taken out after 3 minutes? Fans pay for this product. My brother gave me the Fever over $15K the last 3 seasons. My brother and me gave the Fever over $15K the last 3 seasons, and his is done. Drove 2 hours each way to see them. Why are you blowing this? Cooked? You all will become a case study on how inept, inconsistent, and grossly unqualified every single one of you are. Cooked? Wow. Wow. Cooked? You're not fooling anyone. Cooked? You don't have her back. Cooked? Y'all blow the chance to be the Dallas Cowboys. Cooked? The abuse Caitlin Clark has endured has been horrific. Cooked? It's not a narrative anymore. Cooked? Wow. Fever front office sticking up for themselves for sticking up for Cece. Cooked. Getting destroyed. Getting absolutely destroyed. Seriously, it's not a narrative. Cooked. You don't have to pretend. Cooked. Oh gosh. Are you trading Clark? Cooked. Damn. Damn. Everyone can see what your organization is doing now. Cooked. Wow. Why would you in the front office allow hateful hit pieces for 2 weeks on CC? Even Lynn Dunn was on a podcast making cryptic remarks. Cooked. No, they all could get cooked, folks. Dark side. Shout out to Scott Agnes.
And then we get to the coaching situation. Stephanie White was asked about congressional representatives sending a letter to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert expressing concern about the physical targeting of Caitlin Clark. The letter specifically mentioned that reports suggest many of these attacks may be racially motivated, which is obviously referring to the narrative that Caitlin receives special treatment because she's white. The reporter asked Stephanie White for her reaction as a coach when one of her players is being discussed in a letter from members of Congress to the league commissioner. That's a legitimate question. That's news. And Stephanie White's response was to say the team already made a statement, then deflect by saying they're not affiliated with Congress, and they focus on what they can control, which is technically true but completely misses the point. The question wasn't whether the Fever are affiliated with Congress. The question was how she feels as a coach when the physical targeting of her franchise player has become significant enough that elected officials are getting involved. A competent answer would acknowledge the seriousness of the situation, express appreciation that people in positions of power are paying attention, and reaffirm the organization's commitment to player safety. Instead, White acted like it was an inconvenience, like it was a distraction from basketball. But here's the thing, it is basketball. When your star player is getting clotheslined, hip-checked, and body-slammed game after game with minimal consequences, that affects basketball. When officials allow illegal screens that would be called fouls in any other context, that affects basketball. When opposing players can flagrantly foul someone with no ejection, that affects basketball.
You are full of shit. Cooked. Oh man, is Amber Cox gonna run away now? Is she gonna run away? You're wasting your time with troll accounts when you really should have been protecting yourself for the future cap and trying to add, shout out to Millie, I'm Millie Rock on any block, and protecting the VAR to fix the perimeter defense issues you have, which is inability to force turnovers when you play your two starting guards, but that's just my opinion. This is insanely unprofessional. Shout out to CDS. Attacking Caitlin Clark fans after being called out on obvious truths is certainly a response. I have questions for you, Amber, but I don't think you have the courage to answer them. Attendance keeps going down. You won't survive without Clark.
The pattern is unmistakable at this point. Every time there's an opportunity to publicly support Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever front office either stays silent or offers the most tepid corporate response possible. But when Kelsey Mitchell does something noteworthy, the enthusiasm is genuine and immediate. When Aaliyah Boston makes an all-star team, the celebration is real. There's nothing wrong with celebrating those players. They deserve recognition. But the contrast in energy is obvious, and fans aren't imagining it. They're watching the same press conferences, reading the same statements, seeing the same social media posts. They're noticing that when Caitlin wins an ESB award, Stephanie White's response is to mention every other WNBA player who's ever accomplished anything, as if the question was about the entire league's history instead of about her own player's achievement. They're noticing that Amber Cox's most passionate social media posts seem to come when she's defending the organization against Caitlin's fans, not when she's defending Caitlin against media narratives. They're noticing that Lynn Dunn, the team's director of player personnel, has been connected to background information, finding its way into negative stories about Clark. None of this is subtle.
Hostility and violence toward her. One line in particular said, quote, "Concerning reports suggest that many of these attacks against Caitlin Clark may be racially motivated." What's your reaction to that?
Our team made a statement yesterday, so you can find that statement.
No, I understand that.
Weak as fuck?
I just mean as a coach, when you hear one of your players is being mentioned in a letter from members of Congress to the commissioner of the league, how do you handle that?
Again, that's not something we can control. We're not affiliated with those groups, and we try to keep the main thing, and focus on the things that we can control.
You're not affiliated with Congress? No shit, Dick Tracy. No, no duh. How about we see what's going on the court, and we're going to start doing our best to make sure that Caitlin Clark gets officiated and played fairly. Stephanie White, no backbone. They all could get cooked. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video, hype the video, and subscribe to the channel. That would mean so much to me. See you next time, and as always, take it easy.
So let's address the core issue here, because this goes beyond one social media exchange. This is about organizational competence and understanding your business model. The Indiana Fever were a struggling franchise before Caitlin Clark arrived. That's not an insult, it's a fact. They had a dedicated core fan base of maybe 2,000 people who showed up regardless of the team's performance. Those are real fans who deserve respect. But that fan base wasn't enough to make the organization financially viable long term. Attendance was declining, local media coverage was minimal, national relevance was non-existent. Then the Fever won the draft lottery and selected Caitlin Clark, and everything changed overnight. The fan base didn't grow gradually, it exploded. Suddenly the Fever had millions of fans. Suddenly every game was sold out. Suddenly there was a waiting list for season tickets. Suddenly the team was getting national television coverage. Suddenly corporate sponsors were interested. That transformation happened because of one player, not because of Amber Cox's roster construction, not because of Stephanie White's coaching system, not because of Kelly Krauskopf's organizational vision, because Caitlin Clark is the most popular women's basketball player in the world, and she plays for Indiana. Now here's where this gets complicated. Those millions of new fans aren't Indiana Fever fans in the traditional sense. They're Caitlin Clark fans who currently follow the Fever because that's where she plays. That's not a criticism of those fans. That's how sports fandom works in the modern era. People follow players as much as they follow teams. LeBron James brought fans to Cleveland, then Miami, then back to Cleveland, then to Los Angeles. Those fans followed him, not the jersey. Tom Brady brought fans to New England for 2 decades, then took many of them to Tampa Bay. That's the reality of having a transcendent superstar. Your fan base becomes partially portable. And here's what the Indiana Fever front office doesn't seem to understand. That's not a problem to be resented. That's an opportunity to be maximized. You have millions of people paying attention to your organization who weren't paying attention before. Your job is to convert as many of those Caitlin Clark fans into long-term Indiana Fever fans as possible. You do that by winning, by building a competent roster around your star, by treating her with respect, by defending her publicly when she's attacked, and by making those fans feel welcome and valued. Instead, the Fever front office seems annoyed that these fans exist. They seem bothered by the attention. They seem resentful that Caitlin gets more credit than the organization does. And that resentment manifests in subtle ways that fans absolutely notice. When Amber Cox decides to spend her time arguing with Caitlin Clark fans on social media instead of doing the actual work of building a championship roster, she's telling those fans they're not valued. When Stephanie White can't give a straightforward answer about her star player winning an award without deflecting to everyone else in league history, she's telling those fans their enthusiasm isn't appreciated. When the front office stays silent during 2 weeks of coordinated negative media coverage, but issues statements after wins, they're telling those fans that organizational image matters more than player protection. And those fans are responding by calling out the hypocrisy. They're pointing out that attendance was declining before Caitlin arrived. They're noting that the Fever's social media engagement was minimal before Caitlin got drafted. They're highlighting that local Indianapolis media barely covered the team before Caitlin made them relevant. These aren't attacks, these are facts. The Indiana Fever had an opportunity to become the Dallas Cowboys of the WNBA. They had a chance to build a dynasty around a generational talent who brings unprecedented attention and revenue. Instead, they're fumbling that opportunity through incompetence, ego, and apparent resentment of their own success. Amber Cox getting destroyed in the replies to her tweet isn't just about one social media exchange. It's the culmination of months of frustration from fans who are watching a once-in-a-generation opportunity get wasted by people who don't seem to understand what they have. And the saddest part? This was all avoidable. If the front office had simply done their jobs competently, if they had defended Caitlin publicly when she was attacked, if they had built a proper roster around her, if they had treated her fans with respect instead of contempt, none of this happens. But they didn't. They chose a different path. And now they're facing the consequences of that choice. Thousands of fans telling Amber Cox exactly what they think of her performance as general manager. Thousands of people pointing out specific failures in roster construction, player protection, and media relations. Thousands of voices saying the same thing, you're blowing this. So where does this go from here? Because Amber Cox isn't going to stop being the Fever's general manager tomorrow. Stephanie White isn't getting fired mid-season. The front office structure isn't changing immediately, which means this tension between the organization and a large portion of the fan base is going to continue, and that creates a really uncomfortable dynamic. You've got millions of fans who are invested in Caitlin Clark's success, but increasingly skeptical of the organization she plays for. You've got a front office that seems more concerned with defending itself than with addressing legitimate criticisms. You've got a coach whose body language and public comments suggest she's not entirely comfortable with the attention her star player brings. And you've got a player in the middle of all this who just wants to play basketball and win games. The smart move would be for the front office to take a step back, acknowledge that they've made mistakes, and commit to doing better. Acknowledge that they should have been more vocal in defending Caitlin during the media pile-on. Acknowledge that roster construction hasn't been optimal. Acknowledge that fan concerns about minutes management and player safety are legitimate. And then actually make changes. Hire a legitimate backup center, fix the perimeter defense, implement a coherent offensive system, protect your franchise player more aggressively, treat the fans who are spending thousands of dollars on tickets with respect instead of contempt. It's not complicated, but based on Amber Cox's response to criticism, that's probably not going to happen. Instead, we're likely to see more defensiveness, more deflection, more corporate speak statements that say nothing of substance. And that means the gap between the organization and the fan base is going to keep widening, which ultimately hurts everyone. It hurts the Fever because they're alienating the people who are funding their success. It hurts Caitlin because she's stuck in the middle of a situation she didn't create. And it hurts the fans who just want to see their investment treated with competence and respect. So if you're Amber Cox and you're reading this, here's my advice. Log off social media. Stop arguing with fans. Start doing your actual job. Build a roster that can win a championship. Defend your franchise player publicly and aggressively. Treat the people who are making your organization relevant with respect. And maybe, just maybe, you'll stop getting destroyed in the replies every time you post. But somehow, I don't think that's going to happen. What do you think? Is the Fever front office salvageable? Or is this dysfunction going to continue until Caitlin's contract is up? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure you're subscribed because this story is far from over.